This is so interesting. We're talking about like impressing upon language what you want, or like impressing upon kids and their thoughts what you want. This was a great example. You retweeted it, James. It's from my thin formed MKE.
Myth-informed Milwaukee.
Myth-informed. I can't read
Milwaukee. That's the everybody is always talking to me about him. They're like, "Who's that Mike guy?" And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "The one with the MKE." Myth-informed Milwaukee.
Now it makes sense. According to this teacher educator, toddlers have a unique sense of what is fair and just in this world. Hence, they are ready for deep conversations about racial topics, despite not knowing what race means. Indoctrination of kids and starts in preschool. I'm going to rewind this back.
I wonder what you say to teachers who say, "Oh gosh, but my kid is preschool. They're toddlers. We don't need to talk about difference. That'll just create differences." I just wonder what you say to those folks.
Yeah, I've actually had that question quite a bit. And I tell them, if you spend time with those children, they let you know justice and fairness are top of mind for them. I don't know if you've ever been in a room of toddlers. They will tell you what is fair and not fair. I taught 2-year-olds and they don't miss a beat. If you have one more than I have, I'm going to notice that. And they know why did she get to go in that area and I'm still over here? They'll come and ask you those things. So children very early on have a sense of what is fair in the world and what is just and how do you make things right. So for folks who shy away from that conversation, I say, yes, but if you listen to the children, they're telling you they're ready for these kinds of conversations.
They're telling you, James.
And they may not know the word race, but they do know differences. They do know justice. They have a sense of that. And when it comes to race, if you want to be explicit in that, right, talk about race with young children, part of that is being prepared for that conversation. I remember getting ready to be, when I was a classroom teacher, getting ready for children to ask me why my skin was darker than theirs.
So I wonder what you...
First of all, her name is Dr. Nicole Russell. She can't even spell her own first name. It's Nicol. So that for me was my first red flag. And then she says, "Oh, well, this kid is wondering, why am I in the corner and this kid's not?" It's like, yeah, because you hit your classmate with a frying pan. Like, kids are not.
Yeah, I was going to say
things, but they don't.
I was going to ask you if it's okay if I swear on your podcast.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, here's the truth that the Dr. Russell doctor is overlooking is that kids are fucking stupid. We don't want 2-year-olds organizing society. They can tell what's fair and not fair. Let me tell you how that works. It turns out I will use the word precocious for myself as a young man, as a child. And I had this running scam that I finally got the shit beat out of me for when my parents figured out what I was doing. And I had this running scam on my brother where I could give him 2 $1 bills and trade it for his $10 bill every time. Look how not fair it is. I have 2, you have 1. You want to trade? Yes. Every time. Because it turns out he didn't understand what the numbers on the bills represented. He just knew how many there were. We don't want, and he was like not a toddler, and he's also like a fucking rocket scientist. He's not stupid. And so we don't actually, I know this is like news in 2021 to people with doctorates, but we don't actually want toddlers organizing society. Delayed gratification, that's not a thing yet. Understanding that what's going on, having a functional theory of mind, none of that's happening. The toddlers are literally, by definition, if you graded them on the adult scale, total sociopaths. Yeah. And also dumb as rocks, like IQ 4.
If a toddler drops an ice cream and starts crying because it's unfair, it's like, well, yeah, that toddler doesn't understand gravity, but in their mind, that's unfair. Like
that's right.
Somebody in your comments mentioned, like, yeah, children also go to other kids' birthday parties and are upset that they are not also getting presents. It's
that's correct. That's not fair. They don't know. It's like when I was a toddler, not that I'm going to like, haha, like what a cool, smart guy I was ripping off my brother. When I was a toddler, like if I fell down, like my mom had to come over and like yell at the curb that I tripped over, the rock or whatever.
Really?
Like to make me feel better. Like, cause I was a stupid little shit. Cause I was a toddler. And it turns out that this is, we're joking around Dr. Russell here, who has this completely dumbass idea that she's using. And it turns out that this is deep in their mentality. Like there's a book written in 1970, I think, called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. When I say I think, I mean plus or minus 2 years on one side or the other of 1970, written by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian Marxist who destroyed their education system completely with his crackpot ideas. And he has like literally an entire chapter. It's only 4 chapters in the book. One of the entire chapters is talking about the need to get away from the idea of teachers and students, because that's a power dynamic, obviously, and you can't have power. We have to get to where we mix them together and have teachers who see themselves as students and students who see themselves as teachers. And it's all this kind of one big morass where the children are now dictating the curriculum. Now we have this big fight in Loudoun County. Who gets to pick the curriculum? Apparently not the parents. But part of their answer is, what do the children want? And you think, no, that's ridiculous, right? No, it's not ridiculous. It's exactly how our universities got dragged off into diversity hell to the degree that they did. If you ask administrators, why did you do all this DEI crap? They'll tell you almost to a man that it was a bottom-up desire from students.
What is DEI? Is that
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like they said it was bottom-up. That means the students came in and demanded it, and our student services offices recommended it, so we went with it. The reason is because they financially trapped themselves by building lots of infrastructure like new stadiums, bowling alleys, movie theaters, new $50 million, business classroom building that they didn't need, like crazy billions and billions of dollars in mortgages on these campuses to try to attract students in this weird arms race that happened after everybody could get a student loan that's federally underwritten, which was a Clinton decision. And they started competing for that infinite amount of federally underwritten money, and the student services arms race was the thing. And so now you're in here like could you imagine the idea that you're going to run a business you're going to run a school, and you're going to run it so much like a business that you think, oh, well, what the kids want to learn is what we should do. I mean, that's like a Beastie Boys music video or something like that, like an obvious parody of reality, but that's what the aim is. So here we have Dr. Russell, who's like, oh, listen to toddlers. They know all about fairness and justice because they're so perspicacious at 2 fucking years old. They know all about it. They know the words perspicacious too. They said it, and then they said freedom right afterwards. Yeah. Who knew?
If you can't keep yourself from swallowing Legos, then yeah, you shouldn't be deciding.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in total agreement with that. Like total agreement that if you're crawling on the floor, sniffing around for Parmesan cheese or crumbs or rocks or whatever it happens to be, and that you shouldn't be making decisions that you don't actually understand. A judge used to be something that you would hold in extraordinarily high esteem in every society, like ever. And who are they? What's your archetype? If I said, picture a judge, what do you picture? Probably an older person. Yes, definitely a white man but older, more mature, somebody who's been around the courtroom or whatever in law for many decades.
I picture Judge Judy, actually. That would be my ideal.
There we go. Yeah, well, that's an ideal judge because she doesn't put up with it.
Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining.
That's right. Yeah. But that's the thing is we picture somebody who's like really been around and thought through some things and is mature in their thought. It turns out you probably didn't think of a toddler.
No.
Right? No. Yeah.
Because
the toddler is like going to be hitting the dog with the gavel immediately.
Yeah. It's this letting, and I don't know if it's pressure or it's like a generational thing of like, what these teachers are saying. I feel like it just, I don't know, it ties into how I see a lot of kids being parented, like this hands off, like, oh, like I remember when I'd hear about like Montessori schools and like, oh, we just let them, I'm picturing like free range kids just wandering around. We let them decide like what to study. And it's like, what? It's like, why are we letting go of responsibility and like, just parental obligations over like, being nice. It's like boys, girls, everyone does better with more structure, with knowing what the expectations are. I used to work in a school. It's like, you're in charge, man. You're the adult. You're the parent.
I mean, look at dating even with adults. It's like, don't play games, right? Everybody just wants to know the damn rules. Like, okay, you don't want me to call you when your husband's around. I got you. Whatever the rules are. People just want to know what the rules are. And the same kind of thing here. People actually, children especially, because turns out their rational capacity for abstract thought has not fully developed. Need boundaries because the likelihood that they're in general going to be able to work out the proper boundaries for themselves well is pretty low. So you actually you optimize the situation that they're in by not letting them be free range and decide everything for themselves. Like if you just let kids decide, if you actually looking at the polls, if you just let kids study whatever they wanted to study, every single one of them will be studying TikTok videography because they all want to be viral on
That's
TikTok.
all what they want to be when they grow up. Like there's a poll I read where like the number one like job that these high school girls wanted to do when they grow up was just have OnlyFans. Like that's it. So that's a little alarming. And it's just it's scary that we can see somebody that just because they have a DR in front of their name, they're allowed to totally put what they want onto these kids, which are they're basically blank slates, you know, and like she has an agenda and she is like reading what she wants into these behaviors and they're just sort of nodding like, yes, this is all the this is the cultural wokeness that we're all subscribing to. And like, yeah, we need to shape the youth. It just like my sister's a teacher. I think she's one of the good ones, but I see more and more teachers who I feel like are just a little too hungry for influence, a little too hungry for control. And everyone's really kind of their eyes are being opened to it now with this just mass participation in school board meetings and just parents getting upset. And you had a really great episode come out recently where you were talking about, you know, these language manipulations that happened and how you have to be really vigilant about keeping on top of what's being taught in your kids' school. And, you know, that's just one example. It's kind of all over the culture, but, you know, you're responding to this like, oh, you know, teachers will say, well, we're not teaching critical race theory. We're not teaching it. And you're like, no, correction. Like you're doing it. You are actually doing it. Like you might like mince the words a little bit, but it's like, it is actually going on. And you were telling people what to look for, like look for words like equity, look for phrases like white privilege. Like it's not about what they're saying. Yeah. It's about what concepts and ideas they're teaching. And that sounds like something you need to constantly stay on top of. Like, I don't think my parents, when I was in school, like even looked into what we were being taught. But again, like every generation has its problems that are kind of,
I mean,
more
9
urgent.
times out of 10, like when I took geometry, we did geometry, right? And so 9 times out of 10, when our parents didn't need to look very hard because we could actually still trust the institutions to a degree. The problem that they weren't catching was this emphasis on feelings. You said, where did this come from? It turns out that, you know, the answer to where did this come from is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, just to kind of oversimplify, you know, one of the biggest philosophers of the last 500 years, one of his many kind of strange, damaging beliefs, his counter-enlightenment beliefs, was that sincerity is a better arbiter of truth than reason, logic, and evidence. He thought that reason was too sterile. And so, you know, but instinct and emotion is too raw. And so that there's this thing in between that's like sincerity. And so if you sincerely express something, say, I don't know, it may be the fact that only 9 unarmed Black people were killed by police in 2019, but it feels like to me that it's murder on the streets every day. That sincerity is like this, and that's what Dr. Russell was ultimately appealing to. I don't know whether she's ever read a word of Rousseau, I don't know, but that idea has come down to where she's like, look at and another idea with Rousseau is the noble savage, which is the noble child now in this context. Look at what the noble toddler already knows. The toddler already has intrinsic instinctual understandings of fairness and justice that exceed those that have been poisoned in us by our racist capitalist system. And so they're ready for these conversations already. Look how noble, you know, the child is. And then what's coming out of that is they're so sincere in the way that they, you know, this wasn't fair. She has 2 and I have 1. That's not fair. Well, you know, maybe the kid that got 2 did something to earn 2, but
yeah, maybe you're in the corner because you hit somebody, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he hit them because, you know, of equity and, you know.
Yeah. So,
whatever.
I mean, so it turns out there are actually deep, ugly philosophical roots for even this complete idiocy that we see from the good doctor.
Yeah. Doctor. Anybody can be a doctor now.